It's the Scene World Podcast. I'm AJ. Joerg is over there. Hey, Joerg.
Hello, everybody.
Are you doing well?
Yes, I'm doing absolutely fine.
Okay, that's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
So we're back after a small break for the holidays.
No yet January episode.
In a little bit, we're going to talk with the Vice President and CEO of 3D Realms, Mike Nielsen and Frederick Schreiber, which is pretty cool because 3D Realms is, everybody knows that. That's Duke Nukem and Wolfenstein 3D and Commander
Lake
Keen.
Stone.
And, Math Rescue.
Yeah.
And
Wacky Wheels.
Wacky Wheels too? I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. I don't know if I've ever played that game, but I know the name. I know it. Or I know of it.
It's a Super Mario Kart.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Super Mario Kart for the PC.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, maybe I have played that then. It sounds really familiar. Yeah, so we'll be talking to them in a little bit, and that's really cool because 3D Realms is, that's kind of a big deal. And we mentioned them a couple of podcasts ago in the intro to the Cinemaware podcast, and I guess they heard us because now we'll be talking to them.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we did. We talked about them coming back when we were talking. We spoke with them with Cinemaware too. We mentioned that they had come back from the ashes.
Oh yes, you didn't remove that part.
I did not. I kept that part in for our listeners. This is heavily edited because when we do this live, we sound like idiots.
So we didn't wait till Christmas because Duke says, "What are we waiting for? Christmas."
Mm-hmm.
So
we waited for New Year's, almost Valentine's Day.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it took, of course, a bit to get the appointment made, and but actually got them together.
Yeah. So 2 podcasts ago, we talked to Cinemaware. As of last podcast, they were almost finished with their Kickstarter. It was winding down, and we reminded you guys to donate if you could and really kind of help them get their thing going. And we are happy to report that they succeeded. They raised over $90,000 of their $89,000 goal. So I am attributing that success to us and to all of our lovely listeners who listened to us and donated at the last minute to make it happen.
Yeah, and raising pledges too.
Yes. That's all of our doing. They should be way thankful to us and should totally name a character after us.
Being mentioned in the product manual as supporters.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I was looking at their rewards, and for one of the higher rewards, you were named as an in-game character, the commander of Fort Dix. Yeah. And the funny thing is that where I lived in New Jersey is actually right on Fort Dix.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, it's like right there. You and I drove through it when you came to the U.S. Yeah, you were here. We went to Fort Dix
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. In fact, where you stayed with me at my house there, that's like right outside of the Army base.
Yes.
So that's kind of cool. So you've been to the place in the game. I've been to the place in the game. They should really name those people after us for helping to get their goal.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Sven first thing, the product manager, he was doing that Twitch live show in this very second, and he was so nervous you could tell it. Like, oh my god, like 1 minute left, 30 seconds. Oh, we lost somebody. Oh, now we are underfunded, and now we are overfunded, and now we are just funded. Oh my god, I can't believe it! This was you could see he was totally nervous about it.
And you were a guest on one of his Twitch shows.
Oh yes. When he did that show, that he did like a week before the deadline, which was shortly after our podcast, he invited me. Because I was mentioning during the podcast that I actually played the regional Rocket Ranger and also Defender of the Crown and other games from Cinemaware. So he wanted to know my opinion about the extended playable demo they released shortly before the campaign was ended. So he invited me to the live shows, and if you search for NAVCOM on YouTube, you can actually go to the playlist interviews with NAVCOM, and then you would get all the interviews that I ever gave in video or audio in English and German, because I actually got the permission even from the German radio station Bayern 3 to publish the interview that I did with them in 2001 when I still was 18, and I just released the first issue of Scene World.
And you were 18 when we did the first issue?
Yes,
God.
18.
Child.
Yes, just an adult in Germany.
Yeah, dang.
Yeah.
Wow,
Dang.
That was a long time. Now look at you got a beard and everything.
Well, this is actually my shaved state.
Yeah,
almost.
me too. Yeah, it doesn't stay. I'm like Homer Simpson. You shave and you turn around and it goes pump and comes back up.
Yeah. So I would have to shave like every 24 hours, but I'm too lazy.
Yeah, that's.
But I do in before every video podcast recording. Every podcast recording and every video recording I do. So
you should grow a stylish mustache, a little twirl up at the edge there, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, yes. Well, there's another thing we have to report here, and this is pretty cool. I managed to apply for the scene.world domain, so I got the .world a generic top-level domain, and so now you can reach us at scene.world as well, or podcast@scene.world, or contact@scene.world, but the old email addresses and the old URL will stay the primary one. So this is just a bonus.
That's cool.
Yeah, because
and there's some things don't even recognize these links yet. When you try to put them in, it doesn't recognize that they're actual email or.
Yes. Facebook chat and Skype doesn't recognize the generic top-level domain .world yet as a top-level domain, so it will not change it to a URL to be clickable. So you actually have to copy and paste and do it manually. This is pretty cool. Like, what is that? I'm like, that's our secondary URL. Like, seriously? Like, less? Yes.
Look at that.
So,
we may be a retro mag, but we're ahead in the internet game. We're so new they can't even understand our URLs.
Yes, well, I just wanted to make sure that nobody else is getting that URL because I think it's pretty unique.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. And we are a cool organization, I guess. And the new issue will be totally amazing. Well, of course, I cannot say too much about it, but if you look at the graphic in the iTunes, the podcast artwork at iTunes gives a hint about our next special topic. So we got special guests and other special things regarding that topic. Anyway, as AJ said, we got 3D realms, and the special thing about this year is why Cinemaware was a child memory for me. 3D realms is especially a child memory for AJ.
That's right. Yeah, I've actually played a lot of these games, Wolfenstein and Duke Nukem. You know, and they were when I got my first Mac, when I actually because I held onto the Commodore a bit longer than I probably should have, and when I actually got a Mac, these were kind of some of the things you could play on it, and it was really, I mean, before I even played Doom, I had played Wolfenstein 3D, so that was really it's kind of a special significance because I know these games.
And you will also see in the podcast that they were surprisingly open about it.
Yeah.
Because there is another interview, one interview in English with the German introduction, but you can skip forward to that. And that's 10 minutes. And of course, they don't have so much time in 10 minutes to say. And also this is major German press, and they were a bit careful about what to say, but we managed to get some details out of them about things that are not generally known, and we even got some rumors corrected. Because Actually, I spent like 3 hours on a Sunday where we did that recording to get behind the history and the details of the 3 Apaches companies. Well, who would think actually that there are 3 companies with the same name, you know?
Yeah.
There's one Apache that is doing embedded Java device stuff and environments, coding environments, that has nothing to do with video games, but was actually founded a few months before Apache, which is the original registered name for 3D Realms. So 3D Realms is like a brand of Apache.
A subsidiary of Apogee Software, yeah.
Yeah. And then there is this licensing company, and that is also doing the distribution of the titles of the past. And we should mention that here because it's mentioned during the interview a couple of times. And otherwise, you listeners, you wouldn't understand why we are talking about 3 Apaches. And actually, as an Excel sheet to AJ, saying the 3 Apaches, you know?
Yeah.
So like the 3, how you say it in English? What's the
Apogee?
name? No, of that movie, like the 3 Musketeers?
Oh, yeah, 3 Musketeers or 3 Amigos or something.
Is it really Musketeers?
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
Yep, Musketeers, yeah.
Because I was just making the German sounding English.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. So I was like, okay, use the 3 Musketeers and then the 3 Apaches.
Yeah. Hey, well, they're right here listening to us, so we might as well get started with it.
Sure.
So nice to meet you guys. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah,
so
nice to meet you.
Tell us a bit, Mike, how you actually got involved into the computer business.
Well, it goes really a long way back. My father was actually involved in the shareware business here in Denmark, and was actually distributing some of the games that 3D Realms were making back then, which is a little bit ironic now that I'm the CEO. So that's how I first got in touch with it from a business perspective as a very young kid, helping out at the warehouse and stuff like that. And obviously I got involved earlier than that, playing games. So I've always enjoyed playing computers since my very first Commodore 64, and I had some machines before that. I can't remember what they were, but I think some Ataris and stuff like that. But the 64 was the first one I remember very clearly. So
well, that was the best one anyway. So
yeah, true. Since then, a lot of my time always went with computer games. Spent a lot of time, wasted a lot of time. Some would maybe even say on it, and then in around 2002, I started a business with my younger brother called Cool Shop. We just recently opened in Germany, coolshop.de, which is a web shop, and we focused entirely on games at the time. And now we're much broader. We do all kinds of games, and I worked with that for 12 years before I stopped, and then I met Fred from Interceptor, and it was actually through that we got in touch with Scott Miller and found out the situation at 3D Realms, and I decided to go in and buy it basically to try and see if we could move it forward. So very short recap of my professional and not so professional life.
Yes, you probably saw it. I sneaked into your LinkedIn profile. You are CEO and run a lot of companies actually.
Yes. I've a lot of the companies I've done are other investments that I've been focusing on outside of the gaming industry. I have some some classic investments that I do to try and spread your risk a little bit basically. So
nice. So thanks for taking the time, Frederick. I will call you Fred because I saw in your past interviews you were always called Fred, right?
Yeah, that's way easier for everyone to understand.
Great. Now tell us, how did you get into video games and how did you happen to start Interceptor and get 3D Realms back to life?
Games have always been the biggest passion of my life. From the first thing I got in my hands, actually before I could walk, was an NES controller that my dad got. So it's been part of my life, and as a kid, I was bullied a bit in school as well, and the Nintendo when I was a kid was always the thing that got me home safe, if you can call it that. It was my best friend, no doubt about it. And I always felt that, losing myself to this digital world was the perfect solution to everything. So I fell in love instantly with video games as a kid, and I grew up with video games. They were always my escape from reality, if you can call it that. My first PC when I think I was 6 or 7 when my dad's first PC, where he actually the first games I got from that PC was actually a bunch of Apogee shareware games that was actually distributed by Mike's father's company. His father actually started a company called EuroPowerPack that distributed these shareware games. So I got these games distributed by EuroPowerPack, which Mike had actually packaged together with his father, which is kind of funny. That was my first experience with games, putting them in the floppy disk drive and typing /install and all that stuff. So that was how I got into PC gaming. And then basically making video games in Denmark was not really an option for me when I had to choose which things to study, mostly because video games was an American thing, and in Denmark we didn't really know what video games were. We had one huge success in the late 90s, the first big success in video games, which was the Hitman series. And then as time went on, I slowly realized that it was actually possible to do those kind of games, the AAA style games in Denmark, but not necessarily using Danish talent. So when I finished my bachelor's degree, I decided to start Interceptor and form a group of people from 10 different countries to work on a game called Duke Nukem Reloaded, which was a fan project that was officially licensed by Gearbox Software. And that was kind of a trial to see if it was possible to gather people from all around the world that were really passionate about doing games and all wanted to do AAA quality games, but didn't have the luxury of being in a country where they could either get hired or it was possible. So it was relatively low budget, but extremely high talent. And we used Duke Reloaded as a test flight for this model, and it was relatively successful. We went to a point where we decided to present the game to Gearbox when it was in a really good state. Unfortunately, we decided ourselves to shut the project down after meeting up with Gearbox, since they had no intentions of letting us show the game to the press, mostly because this was around the time when Duke Forever was about to get released, so they didn't want another game that was free and made by fans to take the shine, and that's completely understandable. We decided ourselves to shelf the project until we heard back from them telling us, "Okay, guys, you can go back and show the game now and work on it." That never happened, unfortunately. But a few months later, the word got out about this game that we've been working on, and we were approached by a publisher called Apogee, which is not 3D Realms, but a new company that was formed in 2008, I think.
2008, yeah.
That licensed the name Apogee, and they also licensed a few different IPs, such as Rise of the Triad. One of the fans of Duke Reloaded then decided to invest in our little company, and Interceptor was officially born as a studio doing our first game, Rise of the Triad. So that was a short story of how I got into the games business.
The interesting thing here, when I got my first PC in 1993, I got the same CD you were mentioning. And I remember that because it was in English and my parents didn't really know what to do with it. So we had a really hard time getting around the instructions how to install the games on the CD, but we managed. And so I had all the shareware versions of Plague Stone and Duke Nukem on it on my PC. And I was around 11 or something at that time. So even I got a piece of Mike, and I still have it somewhere around my flat. So
if you have it, I would love a picture of it. That was how my dad started in the business.
Well, if I find it, I will look these days, and I will send you a photo. No problem.
Any trouble with it, but if you run over it, find it by accident.
Sure. I have an idea where it could be actually, because I have a cupboard where I have all the old stuff from the 90s, so it could be somewhere in that box. So the interesting thing is, Fred, you didn't start out with C64 like Mike.
I started actually with the NES.
Okay.
Yeah, the Nintendo Entertainment System. That was my first system. It's still my big love. I still consider it the best console in the history of video games, obviously. Without the NES, the video games industry probably wouldn't exist today. After the Atari video game crash, the NES was the console that brought the industry back to life. So I feel we all owe the video games industry today to the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it was also the first system, in my opinion, that is timeless. Once you go one generation back from the NES, you go back to the Atari, the C64, and so on. The games haven't aged well. Most of the games are more like relics than they're actually great games today. Where the great NES titles are still great games today, maybe even better games than most of the games you get today. They were the games that defined all the genres we know today and so on. So definitely my favorite platform of all time. And then, of course, a few years later, I got the first PC, and then I've been a PC guy ever since.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that with the NES, because the NES, I had a C64 growing up, and at that time in the 80s, we nobody had all the consoles. Someone had an individual. I had the C64. My friend down the street had an NES. Another friend had the Sega Master System. I guess it's the I don't know what they called it in Europe, but the
it was the same. Yeah,
I think it was called the same.
Yeah. And out of all of them, I mean the C64. I always thought the C64 has awesome games, and then I played the Nintendo, and it was like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
But I think there's also another reason for that. I think Fred is, I'm somewhat older than you. I don't know, maybe at least 10 years older than Fred. So when Fred was a young kid, starting much earlier than I actually did.
That's true. Yeah, he is even younger than me.
That was the only thing we had at the time. And then I went on to an Amiga. Then I had the NES and the Sega. I actually had quite a few of them. I had a very... I was very spoiled as a kid, to be honest. I think I've almost all of the consoles, but I don't remember. And I think Fred has an amazing collection of all these old games. He's really kept a lot of them in very good condition and full boxes. And he has it's his retirement fund, I think. So
I think the crown jewel is we still have an unopened NES at the office, an original box that's completely mint. With still the plastic inside and everything. Ooh. That's probably the crown jewel. But the NES was released in Europe way later than in Japan. So I think in 92 it was released. 91 or 92 was released in Denmark. And the huge issue here was that in the rest of the world they had the Super NES. So if I lived in the United States, I would probably have grown up with the 16-bit era games. But because I grew up in Denmark and we got things way later back then, I grew up with the same games and consoles as someone who, like Mike is like 6 years older than me, I think 7. So I really enjoyed that. I love the 8-bit era. But we were always getting games later than everyone else.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I talked about this topic to David Crane about the video game crash, and he was the founder of Activision, the first third-party Atari cartridge manufacturer, and he actually said he is responsible for the video game crash because he made it appear to the press and to the companies like it's easy to make big-selling games, and then all this trash was coming out. And he also said that the NES was the reason the video game crash stopped. So he's totally backing up your side of that medal.
But video game crash also opened for, you can blame the crash for a lot of things, but if the crash hadn't happened, Atari would probably still be on top. And since it did happen, then there was a new market completely open, which was the home computing market. Yeah. Because that was kind of a backdoor into gaming. Again, people didn't want to buy consoles because of the crash, and consoles were just crappy toys. Yeah. So they started making games for the Apple II and then for the IBM PC and so on. So that was kind of a gateway into video gaming. And then all of a sudden, when the NES exploded and the Super NES, we had the early 90s. All of a sudden, the PC had a huge renaissance with, Apogee basically leading with the torch with everything from Commander Keen and Wolfenstein and Duke Nukem and so on. So it's super interesting that the crash, the video game crash with Atari basically spawned two new video game industries, the PC and console space, which is super nice. So, we kind of owe it all to Atari fucking it up.
Praise to David Crane. Thank you for causing the crash. Yeah, it's interesting because if I look back to my memory, in 93 I started playing Commander Keen at the age of 11 at school, and 1998 we actually played Duke Nukem.
Yeah.
In classroom. So first we played Commander Keen, and then we
in classrooms.
Yeah.
I got expelled from school so many times because back in 95, 96, we started getting IBM PCs in the classroom. In the back of the classroom, we had like 3 or 4 PCs that we could use for educational stuff, and it was all linked together because of printing and so on. But the IT guy at the school knew very little about it. He usually just got a huge manual. You got the Windows manual and you got the network manual, and then you basically had to figure stuff out. So when we figured out that if we ran the exe called commit.exe from the Duke 3D folder, it basically searched for other users running the same program, and then we kind of figured out that hey, if you run that in your class and I run in my class, we can play together. So we played Duke Nukem 3D in the breaks, and I got expelled so many times because we weren't allowed to play on these PCs. And then we did everything we could to mess everything up for the teachers. We created fake shortcuts and changed the icon to the word icon and so on that would do completely different things, like delete a lot of stuff on the computers and so on. So we were expelled so many times for messing with these things just because we wanted to play Duke 3D and Quake and all these great games, Command and Conquer and so on. I actually lost my original Duke 3D CD. I still have from the very first time I got it, I still had the box and everything, but the actual CD, I lost that in one of the computers because it was in the drive. And then the teacher dragged me out, and I was kicked home. And then when I came the next day, the CD was gone. So I think the teachers that took the CD and maybe broke it or something like that. So I never saw that again.
I know. How was it for you, Mike, back then? I mean, how do you experience your first steps at school and so on? It must be a bit different because you were growing up in the C64 times.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
For a long time in my school, we didn't even have computers. I think it came at one point, I remember. And, that was I was nearing the end of my education, I think, in public school anyway. And we had a computer room at that time where there was just enough computers to fit one class of maybe 25 students. And then that was all for the entire school of 800 students. There were 25 computers basically that we could share. And we did the same thing. We ran, all these games, Commander Keen and all this stuff. We did we made primitive viruses, just a file that would copy itself every time the computer booted. So it would double in size every time. And at one point that really starts, if it starts off at 1 kilobyte, it'll very quickly be filling up 40 megabytes of hard drive, So, none of the teachers really knew about it. It just, we just started, trying stuff out, and, we figured it out pretty easily. I remember I got my very first PC when I was, we have confirmation here in that. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
It's very traditional to do it. I'm not a Christian or anything like that, but I am baptized, and I do have my Christian confirmation. It's more of a tradition here than it's actually a ritual. And for that, there's a big party normally connected with that. And I got a 486 SX 25, I think, with a turbo switch.
Oh yeah.
One of the first games I played on it, I think, and that was really, with the door shut and everything, my parents couldn't know it was a Let's Shoot Larry, basically, which was not against kids, because I remember the very first scene, I was like, have sex, and then I die because I forgot to use protection. I didn't know what protection was, I think, at that time. But it was just, that was that, and that was, at that time I'd already been programming on my Amiga. I used to do some basic programming on there, and that rolled over to PC, and from there, I started programming Pascal, and I've actually done a lot of programming on CoolShop. If you look at my former company, the very first version of CoolShop, I programmed almost all of it, and even the current version that you see now, even though it's 2 years since I stopped, I've had a finger in a lot of that stuff as well. So if you go to 3drealms.com, I'm a very, I think, not a typical CEO. If you go to 3drealms.com, that entire site, the programming code behind it is written entirely by me. So.
Wow. That's
with a lot of open source inspiration and stuff like that, of course, and using modules where it makes sense to use open source modules. But putting it all together, I've coded all that up, and Fred has done all of the layout, and so yeah, I think we're very hands-on kind of people, and I think that comes from. I'm getting derailed now, but that comes from. I think, at least from my point, my very early interest in computers in general. I really like the technical side of it. I used to play a lot, but I think in fairness, I'm not as big a fan as Fred was and is playing games, and I haven't played as many games as he has. But it really got me started, and I think it's the main reason I'm here today. It was the fact that I was able to make a web shop like 12 years ago when it was, only just Amazon and a few other really major players getting started, basically. So
eBay.
Yeah, eBay and all these like really traditional, old school stuff. That's done really well, and now everyone's going online, obviously, and have done so for a long, long time. But back then it was very, very basic, and Fred keeps saying that at one point I need to start coding a little bit of game as well. I haven't actually ever coded a game, like not a real game. But maybe in the next Interceptor project, I'll write a few lines of code for that or something like that.
Easter egg or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting because you said you didn't really plan to be an investor in a video game company, but Fred convinced you.
Yeah, that's true. I think I was actually trying to get away from video games when I stopped at Cool Shop because that was pretty much what we sold. Not that I didn't like it anymore. It was just I just wanted to try something else because I really love Cool Shop. I love that business. I'm still part owner of it, so I just don't work there anymore. But I wasn't really looking for that. I was actually looking more towards tech companies like technology software companies, not in games, but doing new. I think mostly in business software is what I was interested in. Basically, companies developing new business software that could help businesses, in different areas. Basically, that's what I was looking for. And then suddenly I go to meeting with Fred. I'm extremely skeptical because games is just notoriously difficult to invest in. It's very difficult to make your money back if you don't know what you're doing. And here's Fred, a young guy with a great idea. And I was almost hooked instantly. I had 2 meetings that day. It was sort of like almost like Dragon's Den in a small version, where like 2 investors two entrepreneurs come and pitch to me, and then they get half an hour each to sell me the idea, and Fred really nailed that, I think, together with a longtime advisor and your stepdad, basically, who's helped a lot with advice and stuff like that on how to get Interceptor off the ground. So and he's still helping a lot, actually. So
yeah, we're talking about 3D Realms, and that's kind of a big one for a lot of reasons. And we were just talking about where you guys started with your first gaming experiences and all that. Mm-hmm. And we've had different people on the podcast, and most of that, I've heard of the games. I've never actually really played them because I've never been a big gamer. But with this one, it's like I've actually played, even before I played Doom or Quake or anything else, I played Duke Nukem.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a holdout. I held on to my Commodore for a little bit longer than I probably should have. And, we started getting the stuff in the schools, and then I'd go over to my friend's house and he had a PC, and we'd sit there and we'd play that, and it was something really kind of different because I knew of these other games, but Duke Nukem had some stuff that was just that the other stuff didn't have, in that you could go into a strip club and throw money at people or use the urinals in the bathroom and stuff. It's nothing
very
else really.
Yeah.
Well, compared to the rest of the stuff, Doom, you're just kind of walking around shooting stuff, and there's no real personality to the character you're playing. You're supposed to. It's similar to writing a book where you don't really give your main character too much personality because you want the reader to kind of identify with them. So you do that with most video game characters, but they really went a totally different way with that and gave him this really kind of absurd, almost Bruce Campbell personality, where he's yapping off phrases and doing ridiculous things, and which really made it like a really cool game. So this is really sort of I'm talking a lot, but this is this is kind of interesting in that I've played Duke Nukem and I've played Wolfenstein 3D. That was one of the first ones I played when I actually got a Mac. My brother and I used to play that, and there's one of the bosses or somebody in there, he goes Guten Tag, and you're like, oh crap. And my brother and I still do that. He'll sneak up behind me and go Guten Tag, and stupid stuff like that. But I've played that, and I've played Commander Keen and these other games. So it's like this is actually like a legitimate, like, I have history with these games, as do you guys, in bringing this back. And so one of the things that I was asking was how it ties into kind of the nostalgia factor, in that a lot of companies are coming back that were around back in the 80s and the 90s, and they're popping back now, and they're capitalizing on this stuff that they had done years ago, and that people really want to, I guess, re-experience or re-explore. And I just, what is your feeling on the role of nostalgia in this? And
well, nostalgia is probably the biggest selling factor. The primary reason for us to bring back these games are that we were in a situation where we could bring them back. Pre-Drums has been in limbo for so long, and they had the distribution rights and were the distributors of these games originally. But since Pre-Drums was in limbo, and it was basically a non-functioning company for many years, they didn't have the capabilities to bring these games back as they deserved. And we just thought it would be the most thing in the world to do, to take all of these classic games that defined the PC generation and at least bring them back in a pack where people could play them on modern systems. That would be the very, very first step. So it is a purely nostalgic product. It appeals to everyone who grew up with these games and who remember these games, and allows them to play it on modern platforms. And we gave a few facelifts here and there. We made a nice little launcher for it. We made new cover graphics and made everything appeal to new gamers as well that want to try and dig into the past and history of PC gaming. So yeah, definitely the nostalgia factor was especially the driving force behind the product.
And this is the anthology that we're talking about, which has pretty much the entire back catalog.
Definitely.
And a soundtrack, a special soundtrack.
Yes.
Yeah, the soundtrack is a different thing. So what we especially liked about these old games, what sticks to our mind besides the visuals and the gameplay was the soundtrack. And we had our internal composer, Andrew, redo the tracks from Rise of the Triad for the new Rise of the Triad, and he did an amazing job on that. So the natural next step was to have him do more tracks by Lee Jackson and Bobby Prince, who made 90% of the tracks of the old Apogee and 3Drums games. So we basically picked out some lesser known tracks that were really cool from a range of different old titles, and had our composer Andrew redo those in heavy metal and rock and so on, to create a nice little extra gift for this anthology. So that's what's called the re-orchestrated soundtrack. So that's a really, really cool little thing that we loved doing.
I figured you may have a special connection to music, because if I'm not mistaken, your father is a drumming teacher or something?
Yeah, he's a musician. He plays primarily piano, marimba, drums, and so on. He has a music school called Schreiber Schule. I think it's on trommelkids.de. He has a school in Flensburg where he basically teaches kids from like 5 and up to play drums and marimba and play in orchestras and travel around Germany and so on.
So would you say you also have this influence by him and also pay attention to the music of the games, or of the anthologies especially?
Yeah, I grew up with the NES and the drums. My father, in his house, when I was 2, 3, 4 years old, the only things I was exposed to from my father's side, since I'm a boy, the father is exposing you to all the cool things, that was the drum kit and the Nintendo. So it was those two directions, and for most of my life, it went into the music direction. And then at some point, I think I was 10 or 11, and I've been playing music all my life. And then he told me that I had to soon make a decision if I want to go to in Denmark it's called the conservatory, it's like the music academy, to become a professional musician, or if I wanted to do something else. And he basically told me that he would not advise me to become a professional musician because you can be one of the best musicians in the world and you still won't be able to make a living off of it. And that was kind of what convinced me not to go that route and keep music as a hobby. And then as I got more and more into the games industry and decided to do that for a living and change my life and work around games, music became something I didn't really do anymore. I haven't played the drums for I don't know how many years, mostly because I don't have time, but also because games is and was my biggest passion. But I've always had a good ear for music. Since I grew up. So I do all the music directing on our products as well and have long meetings with our composer to let him know, okay, we need this here, and if you go and do this instead and this direction and so on. So we have a super, super good collaboration between us on all the tracks for Rise of Triad and now the new game Bombshell as well, which is completely different. We're going more of a Hans Zimmer route. With a way more epic score, so that's actually scoring instead of creating a track. So it's really challenging. It's super fun. So yeah, the music has definitely been a huge part of my life as well.
Let's talk about Bombshell because that's some of these companies come out and they put out their older games and they sort of sit back on the victories of yesteryear, but you guys are taking 3D Realms and you're actually doing new stuff with it. You're moving it into the future, developing newer things, and Bombshell seems to be the big one. And I'm looking at the webpage right now and it doesn't say anything other than that's coming in 2015.
I just sent a link. That's what we're going to reveal in a few months from now. That's an in-game shot from the game. But yeah, that's what Bombshell is.
That looks very interesting.
Yeah,
that is that's the current game we're working on.
Interestingly, compared to the preview video you released, her face doesn't seem to be so metallic and destroyed.
Well, we showed like a trailer of a different Bombshell, and the reason for that, that was a really bad decision.
We were trying to rush it out the door because we were a small studio, and we just wanted to, really follow our initial plan. And really
there was multiple issues with our release plan for that, mostly because we were still working on the other project, and we kind of tried to reveal this as soon as we could to get people's minds off Duke and more on this new game. And rushing something to please the fans is the worst thing you can do, because then you won't please anyone. Then everyone will see this is a rushed thing that they did, and we immediately saw that once we revealed it. And from that moment on, I think it wasn't even like a week after. Yeah. We had the thing scrapped and started over, and we basically sat down from that point and decided, okay, what is Bombshell? What should Bombshell be about? Who is she? What's her name? What's her story? What's the story of the game? And we started spending weeks and months writing the entire lore around the game, the entire character, what's going to happen in Bombshell 2 and 3, what are the different planets you're visiting, and what are their ecosystem and the races, and what are their conflicts. And we just went completely nuts on it and completely redesigning the entire thing. As you can see, we took down the old stuff because it's not representative of anything we're working on currently. What you see in the screenshot is then what has come out, what we've been working on and developing for the past year or so, which we're revealing very soon with gameplay and so on. So that's the product that we're proud of, and that's a product where we decided to show it when it was ready to be shown, and not say, okay, let's just show it at this date and rush everything as fast as we can to have it ready. So that was the biggest mistake we've done. Everyone does a mistake like that at some point, where they are pushed by marketing people and events, and we have to have something ready for PAX or GDC or E3 and so on. But if you don't have anything ready, it's hurting the product way more to show it than to wait for the next event. And that was just a big mistake from our side. So we're really looking forward to re-revealing, as we're saying, Bombshell. And we really hope that when people see the old one, that they really like what they see with the new one.
Well, if I may share my opinion, when I saw the first preview, I thought, okay, this looks like Terminator in a female body or something. And I don't know if that is a character I would like to look at when I play, But this here looks more feminine, but still strong, but not like a Terminator person, That was my first impression, comparing the old version and the new version. I guess that's definitely the better way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's what we thought as well. The first version was designed as an kind of anonymous sidekick that would not steal the show. We completely redid Bombshell from ground up as a really, really strong female action hero that can stand the test of time. She'll be able to fight Lara Croft and Bayonetta and these other female characters and Bombshell is the kind of girl that could kick both Lara Croft and Bayonetta's ass if she wanted to. She's not a very feminine person in that way. She's a very, very strong female leader. You can compare her, maybe a bit to Sarah Connor from Terminator. She has feminine sides, but mostly she's a leader, a very, very strong leader. She takes her mission extremely seriously, and she wants to do everything she can to protect the ones she truly care about. So she's a very, very different character. She doesn't show any kind of weakness, and she's also not a a sexified person. You don't see a huge cleavage, and you don't see a ton of skin and so on, because she's not the kind of person that would care about those things. You don't see jewelry. You don't see. She's a very hands-on person that does not care that much about those kind of things.
Which I think that's kind of a good thing, because there's a lot of these games that have especially female characters in it now, and again, like I said, 3D Realms with Duke was one of the first ones to really give a personality to their main character, and then other games, other companies sort of started doing the same thing, making Lara Crofts and stuff like that, where you actually, are playing a character that has specific things. But so many of them are not so much focused on the gameplay or the personality, but focused on how well their boobs jiggle when they run.
Exactly.
So it's, and I think that's kind of a good thing, because a lot of people have problems with, or a lot of people aren't necessarily, a lot of guys like looking at that, and, that's, but there's also a lot of people that say that that's kind of over-sexualizing the characters, and so to have someone that doesn't do that is kind of refreshing, I think.
Mm. Well, what was Tomb Raider famous for the nude patch?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think in this current era, so something that we personally dislike, and I know it sounds kind of contradicting when looking at our old version of Bombshell, but our old version of Bombshell was not intended to be a main character. But something we personally dislike is when female characters are overly sexualized in video games and are supposed to be heroes. Not saying that these games are not great games, but we do think that strong lead female characters that are strong because of their personality and their leadership capabilities and their vision and their goals and so on are way more important than trying to sexualize them through showing too much skin and doing all these kind of things. And that's something that we personally don't like that much. And that's something that we thought a lot about in Bombshell. What is her personality, and how can that personality shine through the way she looks and acts and so on? And that's how she came to look like she does today. There's a ton of story in her entire look. Like every single little part of her tells a story of why she looks like that and what happened and so on. But she still has that innocent beauty that we still feel female characters need in order. Because you even though a female character is a strong female leader, you still want to kind of fall in love with her because it is your hero. It is a person you want to care for and care about, and you want the best for that person. So we think we found a really, really good middle way with this character, and we're extremely proud, and we can't wait to show the world what Bombshell will look like, and especially what the game feels like. It's such a different game from anything I've ever played, so that's going to be very exciting.
Cool. And when does that come out, or when are you?
We cannot talk about the release date yet, but we will reveal and show the game very soon, and then
we're revealing it at GDC. We will be showing off the game to the press behind closed doors. So I think that's pretty much set in stone. And then hopefully we'll be releasing sometime after that. So.
Do you both guys already think of it like a franchise, like movie, like sheets for the bed, posters, or don't you think so far yet?
So one of the core things in the way we develop games now compared to previously, our first game was Rise to the Triad, which is a completely different title, is that we're thinking of every game we do as Transmedia IPs, meaning that the IP is strong enough and there's a storyverse created around the IP that's strong enough to support everything from movies and books and TV shows and so on. We think that is important, even though you may not want to create other properties such as movies and TV shows and comics and so on. It's important to create a storyverse around the game before even starting working on the game, to make sure that when you start working on the game, when you create the characters and the looks and the worlds and so on, you create them in an already established world, and that makes everything much more thought out. It makes everything make more sense, that if you place, like say you have a rune on an alien world, that rune looks the way it does and acts the way it does because of another story, another place in this universe that is not necessarily part of the game, but it's all planned out. So when we designed the storyverse around Bombshell, we also planned for Bombshell 2 and 3. So the game will end and will have a great ending, but it will not be the end of the overall story arc, which is way bigger than the mission that Bombshell is on in this game. We also have a lot of prequel material, what happened before this game, how she got to look the way she looks, and what happened to her body and what happened in her previous life. Why is she acting the way she is when she meets certain people in this game and so on. So we think it's important that the people feel that they get a look inside a world and they get a look at a specific story set in this world that we created. But there might be a ton of other stories in this world and a ton of other events going on and so on that we refer to in the game. That's something that's extremely important when you want to create new IP that can sustain multiple games and doesn't feel like an empty shell. So definitely yes.
Yeah, and I can imagine that would make it way more immersive to even just be in the game, because you feel like you're in something that's already taking place and there's things happening around you, and that you're not just going through the list of things you have to do to finish the game.
You're basically thrown into the action, and you have no idea what's going on. People are talking around you, and NPCs are saying things, but Bombshell responds, but your reaction as a gamer is, wow, what's going on, and what are they talking about? And then the more you play and the further you get, you kind of starting to understand what's happening in this world and what's the overall issue here, and you start guessing who the real villain is and what's going on and so on. And that's something we feel is super interesting to do.
I think it sounds a bit like Zack McCracken and Maniac Mansion in a way on the Commodore 64, where you start playing that game and you didn't know what you're after. I remember there was this fill for chainsaw in Zack McCracken, and when you tried to pick it up, it said, "This is for another game." And this was a reference to Maniac Mansion, actually, because in Maniac Mansion you had the fill but not the chainsaw, and in Zack McCracken you had the chainsaw but not the fill.
Yeah.
So, if I understand you correctly, we will also create a world that the player doesn't understand from the beginning, but has to experience, and then finding out what's going on.
I think that sounds about right. Don't you agree, Fred?
Yeah, we show hints of things. Everything we show is, of course, related to the game, but it's the things that you find, and some of the Easter eggs you might also find relates to other stories that are not told in this game but could be told in other games. Something we're doing with Rot, this game, we have 2 other games that we're slowly starting production up on, is that every game is somehow linked together in a big storyverse where everything can coexist.
So it's not only about shooting, it's also kind of an adventure game and an adventure series that's linked to each other.
We don't call Bombshell, we don't want to call it an action RPG, because the RPG elements and the action RPG elements and so on are not the same way as you experience them in a game like Diablo, Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, and so on. We call it more of an action adventure game because there are RPG elements, but we're not designing the game as, hey, here's an RPG. So we absolutely do need advanced Dungeons and Dragons rule sets, and we do need to level up the characters and these skill trees for all these things, and each weapon needs its own and so on. We're not doing it that way. We're putting in RPG elements where we feel they seem fit, and that's why we call it an action adventure with RPG elements. But it's more about creating what we think is a really, really good game and a great story. Then we're just making it really, really fun. And that's what it's all about. Very immersive, very cinematic as well, and super fast-paced. It feels like playing a first-person shooter, but you see it from a completely different perspective, and it's a ton of fun. It's very unique. We use the camera a lot. Since we're working with next-gen systems, basically the budgets you usually have for polygons and tri-counts and so on, for characters and environments and texture sizes and so on in the previous generation is what you can use today for instance, isometric games, which means that we can create Mass Effect level of quality or Uncharted level of quality characters from the previous generation today that are an inch tall on the screen. And you can zoom in and out and see, the eyeballs and the hairs, and all the details in the skin and sweat and all that stuff, completely high detail without any kind of blur, smooth transitions and so on. So we're using that a lot to create a lot of cinematics where the camera fly all the way in and you see her eyes and you see like real-time reflection cube maps, and it's super, super nice to be able to do all of this without loading times and so on. So the next generation really allows us to mix and match genres around the game, not just staying with one camera angle for the entire thing. It's super interesting.
So it won't be another Doom.
It won't, no.
Okay, so that means...
I'm looking forward to that. Now will there be a Mac version?
Well, actually, Mike is kind of experimenting with that. I will say that there most likely will. It's so straightforward today porting UE3, Unreal Engine 3 games to the Mac. It's something that we will do sooner or later. We can't say if it will be on release, but it's something we'll definitely experiment with and see if we can get out relatively close to the release of the game.
Okay. Well, if not, I'll put Windows on my machine just so I can play it.
Yeah.
But as you know, probably Steam started with a Linux client too. I think a Linux client. Yeah. So even Steam is reaching out to other platforms.
And that's the same thing with the Mac. The Mac version of all our games will probably be a Mac version through Steam on Mac.
Yeah.
I know that's why Mike plays most of his games is also on Steam on Mac. Because most games today are released simultaneously on Steam for both Mac and PC.
Right.
So it's not that big of an issue today. And we'll aim to do the same thing. But we are a small studio, and the most important thing for us is getting the game out.
Yeah.
And then getting it out on other platforms afterwards.
Yeah, so let me ask you, Mike, how are you actually planning to work with that? Because when I buy a game nowadays, I have two options. Either I get the DVD or I get it on Steam. So if I play it on DVD, I get the data on DVD, and then it's using my account on Steam to verify that I'm an owner with my key. Yeah. But then I figured I installed it on a new computer and I didn't even need my DVD because it was remembering, okay, I had this, I was a legitimate owner because I have it in my Steam games, so it just downloaded it.
That's the way it's going all the way. A lot of these. It's a good way to make sure that no one is running games that haven't bought, but it is also a huge convenience. We're not huge fans of DRM techniques that limit your way of playing your games, but we do understand that it's necessary. No one is interested in having your games sent around for free. But for Bombshell and at least for most of the projects we're working on, we're going digital only at the time. But I have to say, I think I can say that, Fred, without revealing too much. It's a big dream of ours to do a physical version of a game at one point, because as I was mentioning, you should see Fred's collection of boxed games. It would be a dream for us to release a full old-time box with manual and all these cool things. Basically, that was our childhood when you got a game as a child. That was part of the whole magic, was to get this box, open it up, look at the manual, load up the game, and today it's not necessary really, but it's still something we're exploring the opportunity of doing that, but it's also extremely expensive. And
there seems to be kind of a bend towards going that way, because when we had Cinemaware on here, they were talking the same thing. They wanted to put out certain things with the case and the manual and everything all set up for limited edition runs usually. But
yeah, exactly.
It seems that a lot of people, even though everything's going digital, there's still some people that like to have an actual physical thing they can stick on their shelf and look at, And
I think it's the same as you see LPs. Still has some kind of, there's still a market for that. And
right.
It's the same with CDs as well. CD sales have declined rapidly for music, but there's still a market for it. It's still going on. And I think it'll be the same with games for a long time. It'll still probably keep declining, but there'll still be a core of people who want their games. And I think AAA games will continue to come out. We'll probably see less of them come out physically as we go forward, but I think the major ones will still come out in limited editions with statues and all kinds of goodies. Basically, it's a good way to cater to your fans, and it's also, frankly, a good way to make money, I think, and to get your game displayed in every shop possible, basically.
So, Mike, you said it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money, but did you actually consider making a Kickstarter project? Because that is what a lot of companies do nowadays. I have to ask this because it's so hyped.
He loves the Kickstarter stuff. You love the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I love Kickstarter as well. I support quite a lot of projects on there, and I think it's a great way to do, to get stuff off the ground. It's the only thing, we're a little bit hesitant about it. I know Fred feels the same, and he can probably talk more about it. Is we like to keep the game, on the wraps until we're ready to show it off. We'd like to get more, at least that's something we learned in the Bombshell reveal. And the problem with Kickstarter is that it's, it's a little bit of a mixed experience, especially for games, because anyone can put up a good idea. But I think you really have to look at the team behind it, look at how far they are. If it's just concepts and the team has no experience, I would be, I'm always careful in that case. I won't complain. It's just maybe $20-$40. It's not a fortune that you lose, but you see a lot of these projects fail basically, even after they're funded. They fail to deliver on time, and then you just see like old industry legends like Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick put up. Did you guys see the new Thimbleweed Park?
Yeah.
That's the dead show.
I
supported that immediately. Because I just want a game like that, and it's I know these guys have been in the industry for so long. When they put up a budget, I'm pretty sure they know what they're talking about. So
Well, there's some too that people will look at the amount of money that's trying to be raised, and for an actual like a legitimate as you're calling it a AAA game, that's quite a bit of money that would go into it, and a lot of people don't want to really get behind something like that because.
Yeah.
Again, there was a Kickstarter for a game. It was a redo of a game, and I think they were trying to get about $90,000 to do it, which is somewhat reasonable when you've got a team of people. That's not even really paying a year's salary for each person.
Yeah.
But then there's someone else that puts up a more realistic number, which was, what was that, Joerg? The number that
40 million or something, or 50 million or something.
Yeah, and no one's gonna want to put up that kind of money for a game like that. We saw it
a little bit with Outcast as well, which is a game, I know Fred loves it, classic game as well. They put up a very ambitious Kickstarter for, I think, was it 600,000?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And that didn't make it, I think they just put the target way too high. They should have put a smaller target, and they probably would have reached 600,000 in stretch goals.
Right.
But that's something, a general rule in Kickstarter is that you ask for half of what you need.
Yeah.
Because once you reach your goal, the goal should not be the goal of making the full game. The goal, the initial goal of the Kickstarter campaign and the money you need should be to create something that can get in the people's hands, whether it's a great prototype or it's a demo or something like that. And then the stretch goals should be polishing that thing to make it a good real product. Because people are pledging, $1, $2, $5 for a game that in the future, when the whole thing is done, might be a $60 game. So I don't think that pledging on Kickstarter products, you need to pledge a product that ends up with this huge AAA game It can be, a experimental product, or as long as the pledges get something for the money. If it's $5, give them a prototype. If it's $50, give them the prototype plus some cool swag or figurines or whatever they can produce out of it. But I think the biggest mistake is most of these Kickstarter games, they basically make a budget for the game that says, oh, we need 500K. Let's make a Kickstarter for 500K. Make it for 250K and then make the stretch goals go up to 500K or $1 million or whatever. Because then you get something. If you don't get to 500, if you get $499K, $499,000, then you get nothing, which would be terrible, which is terrible. The Outcast guys, they got like $200,000-$300,000 and they didn't see a dime of that. And that was because they aimed too high. So I think that's the biggest mistake for most Kickstarter projects.
I mean, the latest project, Rocket Ranger Reloaded from Cinemaware, they just made it in the last hour or something. They almost didn't make it, so I can see where you are aiming here. And the sad thing is, Fred, what you said, it was also the reason for David Crane to stop developing games in 2011 because of this failed Jungle Hunt.
Yeah.
And the press going after him, like, how can you want millions for a game? Couldn't have been made cheaper. But as you said, maybe it's really better to say we just want a portion of it, then we go with the stretch goals by PayPal, because that is what a lot of projects are doing right now.
I completely agree. And, those $50 million budgets, we live in a world today where I cannot see how a game, no matter the scope of it, can be that expensive to make. And that's coming solely from my own experience. I know that cheap AAA games are between $15 to $30 million. And then you have mid AAA game from 30 to 50 million, and then above 50 to 200-300 million. You have huge AAA such as the Call of Duties and the Uncharted and Halos and so on. But I think most of it lies in the issue of having localized studios in places where salary levels are extremely high, and you have extremely high costs in terms of both production and marketing that are not necessary. If you solely put together a team based on where the talent is located and how good the talent is.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Whether it's a localized or virtual studio, you can cut those budgets in 1/10. And that was the core goal of Interceptor. That was to say, you know what, let's find the top 10 best talent we can and collect a 40-man team. And that talent appears to be, we have a guy in New Zealand, Mexico, Australia, England, France, Italy, Spain. We have from so many places in the world where salary rates are from the most expensive country in the world to one of the cheapest countries in the world. But what's common is that what we pay in salaries, everyone lives like kings, if you call it that, in their own respective countries. Yep. We will never be able to get, we have a great concept artist team that lives in Mexico. They're some of the best we've ever worked with. And I'm sure that if you ask any other AAA studio about these guys' talent, they would say the same, but they would never hire them because they cannot get them to their respective countries. They cannot move them to the United States or Europe and so on because they have no education. They're artists. They are trained in art, and you cannot put that on paper and say, hey, do you have an education? Yeah, I'm good at drawing on paper.
And I know a little bit of Photoshop or something.
Exactly. That does not give you a work visa, and that's absolutely terrible. And no one is harnessing this the same way as, at least that's my experience, Mike. But, if you agree, I haven't seen other studios harnessing this the same way as we do. Some of them are used as just outsourcing. They sign up in an outsourcing company, and then they get a stack of tasks, and they have to draw all this shit just to make a living. What we want to do is we want to make sure that these guys feel like being part of a team, whether they are in Mexico or they're in Denmark or United States. They need to feel like they're part of this team, and it doesn't matter if we are all in the same room or if we're spread around the globe. But what this allows us is we give pretty good salaries, easily comparable to other studios if the studios were in the respective countries. But we have such a lean operation, and we're so aware of our costs around everything we do that we can produce these games for 1/10 of the budgets that other studios do, because we don't we don't buy like skyscraper building offices, and we don't spend like $30 million in marketing because that's just nuts. And there's so many things that raise the cost of these projects and causes someone to make a $50 million Kickstarter project that fails, where you could easily make the game for 10 million or 5 or maybe even 2 or $1 million if you're just aware of how you spend that money and if you're aware of all the talent that is out there in the world. We have one Danish employee, and we're a Danish company. Besides Mike and I, Mike is not an employee, but the only actual other employee we have that's Danish is one guy. And that's not because we decided, we just want one Danish employee. That's because this the most talented guy that we could get was apparently from Denmark. Of all the applications we got, that's the only Danish guy. We didn't think about, hey, let's look at how many Danish guys we can get because they live close by. Down at our office, we have a guy who moved from England. We have a guy from Poland, one from Holland, and then Jacob is the only one from Denmark, actually.
Yeah. Besides you and me, yeah.
So it's a very, very unique way, and we were kind of forced to work this way because Duke Reloaded was virtual and because Rise of Titles was virtual, both low-budget products that were created out of passion. They were projects that were made to enter the games industry. You always have to make a lot of sacrifices in order to make something so people will see, these guys are actually talented. They can actually make something that's worth playing. And then you have to work it from there. But we'll never do $50 million projects. We'd love to get $50 million and make a game for it, but it's just hard for me to see how to spend $50 million making a game, no matter how big and good it is, unless you're wasting a ton of money in a lot of places where you could save them on other things. I do get how important marketing aspect is of it.
Yeah.
You see, I think the latest Batman game had a marketing budget of $30 million. Yes, of course, you need the big movie theater commercials with professional actors and so on. But that's a completely different aspect, and that should not be part of your game development budget. But there's a lot of aspects in it. But I do think games can be made way cheaper than they are when you talk AAA, and that's something that we really want to change. We want to up the quality and lower the budgets.
Speaking about marketing, Mike said he didn't like at first to be in public so much and give interviews and so on.
I've always tried to be very anonymous, is what I was saying at Cool Shop, at least. I never really did a lot of interviews or anything like that. We had a marketing director who took care of all that.
So this is one of those keys in marketing, I guess. You are available for a lot of people. I mean, I emailed you and you were saying, this sounds like a good idea. So let me know.
And then he actually spoke to us and he realized how wrong he was.
No, I guess you are. I hope you are doing fine.
Joerg noticed that your what is the
marketing director?
Marketing director is looking for people.
She's actually looking for people on for AAA developers, game developers on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
she has it on her profile. Like, contact me if you want to work for us. So.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that plans?
I can only say that we're looking to add a lot more developers under our umbrella again, and we're trying to use a model that's inspired by how 3D Realms used to do it, which is a model where we leave a lot of control with the developers. We don't like to take them in and crush their dreams and creativity. And we know that it's so important that the developers maintain creative freedom as much as possible. So we try to provide, because why would you want a publisher today? You don't really need a publisher. You can get a long way with self-publishing on Steam and iOS and all that. But we still think our brand and our know-how carries a lot of value. But we need to be different. We can't just, I think we can't do it like a traditional publisher. So we're trying alternative approaches, and I think a lot of that is to do with the creative freedom that we want to keep with the developers. We don't want to, come in and take over their project and totally alter it. We like to give feedback. We like to change the project if it makes sense, and but it has to be through a joint decision, not through a dictatorship, you can say, by a big publisher. So because we're not a big publisher either, that's the other side of it. So we're basically almost like a new company starting up.
Well, at least you got Joe Ziegler and Scott Miller. being a part
and
of the company.
Brian Turner as well. Yeah,
yes.
He's also been with I think Joe and Brian are like the two oldest employees after Scott and George, basically. So those two guys are been with Apogee and 3D Realms for ages. So Joe is maintaining our forums again and doing a lot of community stuff for us and basically just helping out. He's also in the archivist. He maintains records of everything. You wouldn't believe the stuff he's been able to dig out for us, like the Tom Hall notes that we recently ran on a website. It's stuff that he found and together with us on old hard drives, basically.
So if anybody of the listeners is a developer and wants to work with you,
yes,
you could look
get
through
in touch. hello@3drealms.com. Just write us there. That's just our general inquiry, for anything, basically. Just contact us there, send us a small description of your game, some images if you can, and we'll get back to you and sign NDAs and all that stuff that needs to be in place, so that we can, and hopefully if you have it playable, let us see it. What we're trying to do is to try and find a lot of the European, Scandinavian developers and try and bring them to the US, basically, because a lot of them are really, really talented, but they have no experience in how to sell games, basically. They know everything about developing. They have great ideas, great creativity, great, just great games, basically. But very few of them really make it big. So we're trying to change that. And hopefully we'll be bringing, we can reveal a little bit more shortly about some of the first games that we'll be putting out. So...
so that's your hello@3drealms.com. I can confirm the email address works because that is where I got the answer from Frederick about the invitation for this podcast. So
Okay.
So I can confirm the email address works. You guys do answer your emails, so that's good.
Yeah, we try and keep it answered within a reasonable time. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than it should, but we're a very small team with a lot of stuff to do. But write us there and let us know. You can also, I guess, I don't know how many people follow your podcast, but you could also, write me directly and let me put that up as well. So you're welcome to do that as well. We're hoping to start up an accelerator program where we can help, fund, a lot of more developers, so that they can get their products out there, basically. So, which is something called 3D Realms Accelerate. We haven't announced it 100% yet, but it's something we're looking to announce later this year.
Yeah, actually, I saw it in your homepage, the Accelerate thing you can sign up for.
Yeah, basically just a newsletter so we can contact you when we have more information on it. We're still ironing out the details, but basically what we're trying to do is looking to some of the what can you say, the tech incubators where you do it for software and technology. We're trying to take some of that and put it into games and say, we're willing to help these guys, we're willing to take a risk. They maybe reached a certain level in their development and is now stuck due to lack of funding, a lack of expertise, a lack of whatever. And we try what we want this program to be is a way where we can carry some of these developers through and give them like great conditions, a lot of freedom, and get their products out there, because there's a lot of products that don't make it, I think, because it is self-publishing is easy, but it's also difficult. It's easy to get started with, but it's difficult to succeed with, I think. And I think the 3D Realms name still has a lot of value. Is what we can see whenever we put anything out there under that name. The first time when we announced that we had taken it over, I didn't expect really anyone to respond to it or react to it, and I was just blown away. I've always tried to live a very anonymous sort of life, and not be too much involved with the press. No offense, but it's always I've always liked being anonymous, but I saw that pretty quickly was difficult with 3D Realms, because it's a lot of people has an interest in the company, and I can definitely understand why. So but yeah, that's a little bit about 3D Realms Accelerate. We'll be coming out with a lot more details later this year on it. So right now, a lot of our focus is going on the next big game, which is Bombshell. As soon as we have we're a little bit closer to the release, I think we can start dedicating a lot more time on Accelerate and all of the other things that we have in our pipeline. So And hopefully 2015 and 16 you'll see a lot of new games from 3D Realms. So when I say a lot, a few, 2 or 3.
Well, yeah,
like that, but that is a lot compared to what past.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how do you actually consider AAA, AA, 1A? Because that's also something we were wondering about,
Well, we don't really have a set definition for it. I think the traditional AAA is anything above $10 million is AAA apparently, but I think it's very difficult to say it like that now because there's so many great games getting made on budgets that are way lower than that, and to us they are they could just as well be a AAA game. So we try to look to to the quality of the assets, the quality of the game, the quality of the game design, how entertaining is it? That to us is what that makes up. We'd rather rate based on those criteria than money alone, basically. So because we've seen it a long time, huge games have been taken ages to develop. It doesn't necessarily make them great games. It often, it helps definitely that you have unlimited money, but you can make something really great and for a fraction of the price of a big budget game. So for us, it's all about how does the game feel and how does it really. Is it fun? Does it get the attention of the gamers, basically?
Well, so we should ask Fred, what is for you a AAA developer?
For me, it's pretty simple. It's games that are made. It's high quality games in terms of Hollywood proportions, if you can call it that. A lot of games can be high quality, but be a 1 hour, 2 hour experience. I think for me, it's games that look big budget, that has a playtime of over 8 hours of gameplay, and have beautiful graphics, story, professional voice acting, animation, and so on. So I think the best way to compare this is with the movie industry. The AAA are the movies you see in the cinema. Indie are the movies that you see maybe in independent cinemas, or you see them on Netflix, and you see them on DVD and direct to video and so on. And casual is live TV. That's kind of it's easier for people to understand it when you compare it with that. What we make is we make the cinema games, but we make them at budgets that are way lower than the industry norm, which is getting ridiculous.
Well, I mean, I read a lot about that video games are already getting more money and earning more money than movies. So
movies and music combined. It is the biggest entertainment industry in the world. So it definitely is.
And Ralph Baer, when I interviewed him via Skype video last year, he was like, "We never imagined it would grow so big just because of Pong."
Yeah.
So you probably wouldn't be here and doing the interview if there wasn't him inventing video games and stuff for the homes. Yeah,
that's probably true.
Mike said you are also trying to remaster old games.
Yeah.
So may I ask you, if it's not too much of a secret, what else you have in your minds about re-releasing old games? You made some hints. People were thinking like maybe Plague Stone or something.
Well, we don't have any plans at all. I think we made some hints about what we personally would love to play. And Plague Stone was one of our favorites. We'd love to see something like that return. We'd love to see Monster Bash return, Halloween Harry, Wacky Wheels. There's so many games that we, as fans, not as game developers, but as fans, would love to see return. But we have absolutely zero plans right now on what we want to do. Right now we have Bombshell, and we have 2-3 other projects that we're focusing 100% on. And then we have a few side things from 3D Realms, but there's nothing on the radar right now of remastering and re-releasing these games. The anthology right now is the important part of 3D Realms, and that is basically to make people aware, a new generation aware that these games exist, and these games were actually the foundation of the PC games industry as we know it today. And that's the first step. maybe later down the line we can start thinking about if we want to bring some of these things back and what it requires and what has the potential to be really cool. But we don't want to bring something back, remaster something or make an HD version of something just to do it. It needs to be because this IP or this game could be really interesting if it was a brand new game today. And there's definitely a lot of games that has that potential in the 3D Realms RPG library.
Mm-hmm. I did say we're looking to, old stuff as well. We have released almost all of the games, but there are still some that has not been released, and we're looking into that as well to see if we can add even more games to the anthology as we go along. But that would just be, release of the original vanilla version of the game, if you could say that. So we're approaching 3D Realms in a much more open way, I could say, than the previous owners. Like you revealed some very early beta versions of Duke Nukem 3D, and we're looking through all these treasures that are in this old company, and to see are there any that needs to be out there for the fans to see, or is there anything that makes sense to release, like the Tom Hall notes. Those were a great example of just gold that's sitting in 3D Realms that's never been revealed. And we're looking into that, and we'll probably be dripping out, small droplets of that gold as we go along. So
You also said you're not trying to go towards the casual gamers nowadays anymore, like you did back then with Commander Keen, for example.
I said that, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure Fred agrees. Is that mobile gaming is definitely something we're looking into, but it's not a main focus area of us. I think we could say that. We may have some mobile games coming up, but we'll definitely always try and get them onto the console. Get console versions out of these games first.
Right, and you've also
at the same time, if at all possible. So,
right, you also made a point in that 3D Realms is really you're aiming towards. I don't remember the words we used. Like kick-ass games,
badass games.
Yeah, badass games. Yeah.
What we look for, our mantra in games is badass games. Basically, that's what we look for. I don't think we're the right publisher for the next big education title or casual gaming candy, whatever. That's not. I don't think we're the right publisher for that. I think those are great games, and a lot of great games are getting put out like that. But that's not what we were focusing on. We're focusing on badass action games, basically. Yeah,
and that's something that with the mobile market, it's more like Flappy Bird or something where it's something you can play with. It's kind of fun. Okay, put it down. But I don't think I could ever play like a game where there's 8 hours of gameplay on my phone or mobile device. It's I would stick it through my eye before I actually got anywhere in it.
Oh, sorry, I had to laugh.
Because that's best suited to something where it's like you can sit down and you're on like an actual machine where you can interact better with it than just on a little mobile device sitting on a train or something. It doesn't translate as well into the mobile realm.
Well, we're not totally off mobile. We may be releasing something for mobile in the coming year or next year. But I think for us, what we really love is the consoles. It's the PC. We love games for those platforms. And so that's definitely what we focus on. And I think Fred will probably agree to that as well.
Yeah.
Mobile games are great. I do play a few of them myself every now and then, but we just have a bleeding heart for old-fashioned games, if you could call it that, which we think is still pretty cool.
Okay, and the games that we have available, we can get them on GOG.com, I see.
There's some of them, yeah.
Some of them.
And you can get the full anthology at 3drealms.com.
And that website, once again, is www.3drealms.com.
In our
Feel
future
free
podcast.
to follow us on Twitter as well. Follow 3D Realms, Interceptor. We use that quite actively too.
Yeah. I already followed you with the Scene World account yesterday. So
okay, excellent.
And you probably saw that I sent you a request on LinkedIn and so on. So I already started my research and
excellent. Yeah,
great.
Excellent.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, good
Have
night.
a good night. It's already night here.
Yeah.
And in Denmark too. So have a good night, guys. And thanks for taking the time and being so open.
No problem.
Thank you very much, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
So that was 3D Realms. And once again, 3D Realms website is 3drealms.com. Now, we really recommend you check the site out because there's a lot of really legitimately great stuff there. And it's currently the only place that you can get the 3D Realms anthology, which is which is kind of a really serious thing. I mean, this is 32 games and DRM free. And I mean, we're not paid to say this. We don't do advertisers. So if we don't like something, we'll let you know. So yeah, check that out. And there's a lot of other great games there too, like Duke Nukem and Wolfenstein 3D and Wacky Wheels and Math Rescue. And some of the games like Major Striker, Alien Carnage, Prey, a bunch of others are actually free, so you're not actually risking anything. They all run in modern hardware. Most have some kind of Xbox 360 controller support, which is kind of cool because if you're a console gamer and you've never done this on a PC before, it makes the progression a little bit more natural for you, and you don't really need to learn controls or keyboards or anything. You also find stuff on there on 3drealms.com, like design tips from Tom Hall, and you can sign up for advertisements regarding the 3D Realms Accelerate program. See some other really cool stuff. I actually just noticed that Joel Siegler, who's been with the company for over 2 decades now, has a feature on the site telling stories about the release of Rise of the Triad, which was mentioned through the podcast. So yeah, everyone head over to 3D Realms and check this stuff out. And if you're a developer and would like to get in touch with 3D Realms, then again, the email is hello@3drealms.com, and we'll stick that in the podcast description. You can also look them up on LinkedIn, doing a search there for 3D Realms. And you can follow them on Twitter, at 3D Realms, at Apogee Software, and keep up with Bombshell news by following at Bombshell_game. I'm kind of really looking forward to that game because just from what we've seen and heard in this interview, it looks like they're really putting some major effort into making this a really immersive and cool kind of experience. Also, before we go, we'd like to throw out a huge thanks to Mike Nielsen, who, because of some scheduling difficulties, actually sat through this interview twice with us and was a really great sport throughout the entire process. So that covers that. But what about our shameless self-promotion? Well, you can check out other podcasts, video interviews, and other fun stuff at sceneworld.org. You can also feed your podcatcher with this or find us on iTunes, which you've probably already done because you're listening to me. My website is justwestofhell.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Arthur J. Heller. Joerg's also got a site. It's nafcom.eu. You can follow him too on Twitter at nafcom. And this has been the Scene World Podcast. I'm AJ. He's Joerg. We'll see you next time.